All right, we are officially recording. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ireola Olaifa, and I am one of the climate resilience managers here at the Cleo Institute. We are so excited to have you all join us for today's webinar on what's carbon got to do with it. And in today's webinar, we're really going to learn and understand the carbon cycle and its impact on our climate. And so, with us today, we have our phenomenal senior education manager, Owen Gaither, who is going to walk us through the amazing science and he's going to make it fun, I promise. And we are hosting this webinar in collaboration and partnership with the Miami Community Resiliency Project. And I will pause to give Owen a moment to introduce himself. And then we will also let our colleagues at Miami Resiliency introduce themselves. And then we will kick things off with a four-question poll to just hear where everyone's coming from and to just get a baseline of what you know so far. So thank you. Kicking it off to Owen.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Owen Gaither, and I work with Ireola. As she mentioned, I'm the Senior Education Outreach Manager, and I'll be one of your co-hosts today. And we will be joined by the ResilientSea team as well. And I know that oftentimes science can be or can be considered kind of like maybe not so fun or maybe nerdy or maybe even confusing and like, oh my gosh, carbon is bad and what's happening with the atmosphere and climate change. And so we tried to make it like a fun way, a play on words with what's carbon got to do with it, with the lovely Tina Turner song. And I'm going to try and clarify some maybe misunderstandings and put things into a simple way, whilst at the same time introducing urban biodiversity and each thing's role in the carbon cycle, and what's the difference between the carbon cycle and extreme carbon disruptions that's leading to global climate change. And so I think we're going to have a lot of fun. We worked really hard on this, and I can't wait to see what everybody thinks. You'll probably notice that you haven't been able to talk because of the webinar setup, but we do encourage everyone to be active in the chat. We're going to address anybody's comments in the chat and really get on with that. And so if anyone has any questions, that would be a space to do so. And Iriola, do we have the
Yes.
resiliency team?
Yes, thank you, Owen. So as Owen mentioned, just a few housekeeping measures. If you have questions, you can locate the Q&A tab on the bottom of your pane. But also, as we're having this webinar, if you have comments, you can also put them in our chat here as well, so there can be a bit of a dialogue going on. So I'm going to kick it now to Gloria, who will share some information, or Camilla, who will share some information on Miami Resiliency.
Hello. Yes, I'm here. I don't know why I cannot turn on my camera. I think because of the webinar settings. I'm not a host, but hello everyone. I'm here. My name is Camila Rodriguez. I think
There you go.
there you go. I'm here. Hello everyone.
Hi,
Perfect.
Camilla, welcome.
Thank you so much. So, hello everyone. My name is Camila. I'm here today as part of the Miami Resiliency team. I'm currently the intern, so excited for it. So Miami Resiliency is a community-based initiative focused on building Miami's coastal community and climate resilience through education, citizen science, and hands-on environmental action. So at its core, Miami Resiliency is working to fill two major gaps, the participation gap and the education and experience gap, because we recognize that not all communities have had the same privilege, access, or opportunity to be involved in environmental spaces, marine science, or climate resilience work. And many communities are directly affected by issues like extreme heat, flooding, pollution, coastal change, but they're not often equally included in the conversations or training or activities that address those changes. these challenges, sorry. So this is basically what Miami Resiliency is trying to change. Our goal is to make sure that communities across Miami-Dade County are not only informed about environmental and climate issues, but also are actively involved in resilience building activities. And this includes opportunities like habitat restoration, coastal and neighbor cleanups, coral reef restoration and conservation, community science and climate education like today. And as part of the project, we also work with amazing partners who bring different strengths and expertise to the project. For example, today the Cleo Institute provides climate education and training, helping the community members better understand climate change and how they can take action. And other of our partners are Rescue Reef, the Breeze Free Ocean, Miami Waterkeeper, WIMS, which is Black Women in Evolution, Ecology, and Marine Science, the Frost Museum Volunteers, and also Historic Virginia Key Park. So they help us connect participants with marine conservation, habitat restoration, advocacy, and hands-on field experiences. So Miami Resiliency is about making environmental action more accessible, more inclusive, and more connected to the communities that call Miami home. So yeah, if this mission sounds interesting to you and resonates with you, you can follow us. We would love for you all to stay connected. You can follow us on social media and you can sign up for our newsletter to learn firsthand about upcoming events, volunteer opportunities, trainings, and other ways to get involved. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Camilla. And we have put that website in the chat for everyone to click and learn more about the Resiliency Project. And so thank you. So without further ado, as we dive into this webinar, we're going to kick it off with a quick poll. So we're going to give everyone just about 2 minutes to um, look at that, 2 additional minutes. I see that a lot of us have already started. So there's a lot of folks here who know a good amount about the causes of climate change. So that's exciting to see. And then absolutely, yes, for question number two, a lot of us do think that the carbon cycle has an effect on climate change. And so I guess today we're going to learn the how and the science behind that. And then let's see where folks are coming from. All right. So we're going to give just about 1 more minute and then we're going to close out the poll.
Are most of the people from Miami, Ireola, or do we have some folks from other spaces as well?
I'm trying to look at these answers. 1 second.
It's so fun. Ooh, I
They
see
get
you,
these results
Orlando.
from the STEM. Yes. I think it has to
Yeah,
wait until it ends the poll for me to see all of the responses, but we have 27 so far.
and that's a pretty cool idea too. If you want to just kind of put your name in the chat and where you're from, that would be awesome. Let us know what brought you here. That's fun to do too. Just get everybody talking together.
Absolutely. All right. So that's your minute. All right, last call, and we're closing out the poll. Thank you, everyone who took the time to respond. All right. Let's see. Okay. All right. Oh, Owen, we are going to close out this and kick it off to you.
All right, thanks so much, Ireola, and welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be here. So excited to be here for this webinar. We've been working really hard on it, and I think it's an important aspect. And so as we get going, again, if you have any questions or anything like that, please let us know in the chat, and we'll take it from there, okay? So today we're going to go over the carbon cycle and a warming planet. Now, oftentimes how carbon moves, and this is a natural cycle, doesn't really have to do with the warming planet per se. It's what keeps us warm, yes, but the warming planet has to do more with carbon disruption or extreme carbon disruption. And we'll get into the difference with that. We're also going to talk a little bit about urban biodiversity. We're going to get into identifying some critters that most people think don't have a part in the carbon cycle, which, hint, hint, almost everything or everything has a part in the carbon cycle. So we'll kind of see how they're useful within the specifically urban environments, and then the difference between that natural, good, healthy carbon cycle and extreme carbon disruptions. And yeah, let's kick it off. So what is the carbon cycle? And this is something to think about, right? All living stuff is made out of carbon, right? It's a building block of life. And so how does carbon move from one place to another, right? So the carbon cycle is the natural movement of carbon between air, land, oceans, and all living things, right? Carbon is the basis of all life on Earth, including plants, animals, and healthy soils. In fact, usually when you bring up a big old handful of soil, if it's a healthy handful of soil, you're going to see it move. It's going to have a smell to it. It's going to be something that's alive. It's not just like something that's dead or in a bag and so on and so forth. So that's a really big part of the carbon cycle itself. And this picture kind of shows how carbon moves throughout land and air and sea, right? It's almost as if the planet is an organism and living, breathing organism, right? But so for hundreds of thousands of years, carbon has gone through natural cycles that have warmed and cooled the Earth at a pace that allowed life on Earth to adapt. The speed and scale at which humans are adding ancient stored carbon to modern day carbon cycle has led to dangerous buildup that has unbalanced the system in a way that life on Earth is not equipped or has been able to adapt to. Meaning what was this natural cycle for us to process carbon and for carbon to move in and out of from land and sea and underground, we have taken what's called sequestered carbon, basically fossil fuels, old dead stuff, right? And we've brought that sequestered carbon from underground and put it into the atmosphere, adding carbon to the atmosphere that doesn't belong there. And that's what's causing the problem. And don't worry, we're going to get into that in more detail in a little bit. And so how carbon moves, how it moves now, plants absorb CO2, right? This idea of photosynthesis. This is awesome. However, as things like deforestation and factory farming happen, we have less plants, so less CO2 is sequestered. For respiration, animals, including us, right, we release CO2. As we have more humans, more livestock, more cars, more CO2 is released into the atmosphere itself. So these are the differences between a healthy carbon cycle and extreme carbon disruption. For things like decomposition, right? Carbon returns to the soil and air, but unstable farming practices such as synthetic pesticides, fertilizers, unhealthy soil, and that stores less carbon. So there's less carbon actually sequestered into the soil itself, right? It's not sitting there. It's not being stored there. We release it into the atmosphere. For ocean exchanges, oceans absorb and release CO2. The hotter the oceans, more acidic oceans, fewer marine animals in order to process that CO2 and bring out oxygen. And for long-term storage, fossil fuel extraction and use, the more CO2 is in the atmosphere because what was once dead stuff underneath the ground, we've brought out and extracted and turned it into oil, coal, and gas. And as we process that and use that, burn that, it thickens the atmosphere, essentially trapping more heat into the atmosphere or onto the globe, and that's what's causing the problems that we're seeing today. So for this part, I would like for you to pick one, or we're going to put you actually guys into groups, and in your group, I would like you to tell me how this animal or this organism contributes or what its role is within the carbon cycle itself. And please, I know most folks don't like mosquitoes, most folks don't like roaches and stuff, but I promise you they do have a space. All right, and so we're going to break into groups, and you have about 4 or 5 minutes to talk with your group mates and tell me what you think is the role for your specific organism in the carbon cycle itself. All right. Are we ready, Ireola, for the breakout rooms?
We are ready to go. All right.
All right, everybody. I hope that was fun and exciting. I hope everybody got to have some answers. Now, as we go to these places, I'm going to ask you guys to put maybe any answers that you had from your group into the chat, and then we'll kind of go over. So, anybody who is in group cockroach, and I know there were some of you guys out there. And we actually assigned you groups so that not everybody would just pick the honeybee. Cockroaches need love too. So we want to make sure that each group or each organism had a group. Anybody who is in the cockroach group, can you put how cockroaches contribute to the carbon cycle? We're here. Boom, decompose it. Yes, big ones. And you guys remember, we've been building houses for X amount of time, right? Cockroaches were here way before we started building houses, and the amount of cockroaches that are in houses is a very small percent of the animal itself. And so these things tend to, I don't like them in my house either, but yeah. So here we go. Cockroaches. They feed on dead plants, food scraps, and decaying organic matter. Essentially, when stuff dies, they feed on it, and then their poo becomes carbon or vital link or adding carbon into the soil itself. Cockroaches are decomposers and scavengers. As they break down this material, the carbon returns to the soil where plants and microorganisms can use it. If you remember what I said, when you take a whole big old handful of soil, if that soil isn't moving, if that soil doesn't smell, we're not really sure how healthy that soil is. That soil should actually be moving and be full of, as we'll get to worms here in a second, but different organisms poo is great, as crazy as that sounds. And then a fun fact, cockroaches have been on Earth for over 300 million years, making them older than dinosaurs and older than people's homes. So we started building homes, they came into those homes. It's not vice versa, right? And so just as crazy as they are and as undesirable as they are in your house, they do play a part in the carbon cycle, especially in urban environments. Next one. Oh, wait, I don't want to put that. For those of you that were in the mosquito group, and actually I was in the mosquito group with you, but you guys put what do mosquitoes do for in the carbon cycle? How do they participate into the carbon cycle? You guys there? I know we talked about some good ones. All right. Well, I will just go on ahead. Yep, that's right, Carrie. Food. All right. So mosquito larvae helps recycle nutrients in ponds, wetlands, and other aquatic habitats. Mosquitoes also serve as food for birds, bats, fish, dragonflies, and spiders, moving carbon through the food web. And think about that. Some of the things or organisms that eat the mosquitoes are also pollinators. And check this one out. Fun fact. Only female mosquitoes bite animals and humans. Male mosquitoes feed exclusively on nectar and are actually highly beneficial pollinators for many flowering plants. So even as something as terrible as the mosquito, nobody likes to get bitten by a mosquito. I've never met a single person that thinks malaria is awesome or anything like that. But mosquitoes also play their role within the carbon cycle, right? It's interesting when we break into this idea of the circle of life, right, or the food chain. Each individual organism has evolved to have a space within that circle, within that chain, right? And so next one is the worm. Who was part of the worm, and what role do worms play in the carbon cycle? Ooh, good one, Susan. Worms break down dead plant matter. Yes, that's right. Anybody else out there? I've seen this be called brown gold before, and I'll get into that in a second. But worms make soil healthier. That's right. Yeah, that's where I was going to go with this as well, Christy. I've actually seen worm poop sell at quite an expensive rate in farmers markets because it is fantastic fertilizer. All right, so let's go to the amazing worm. So earthworms break down dead leaves and organic matter and mix it deeper into the soil. So again, when you have soil, it should be aerated. It should be alive. You can see the picture here with the person with their hands and a whole handful of soil. As worms move through that sucker, it breaks it up a little bit, right? And so it's not just hardcore packed. If you've ever seen a planter with dirt that's really packed down, when the rain comes, it doesn't even really absorb in. The nutrients have a hard time. With the sun, things get messed up. But as worms break into that soil and they eat organic matter and they move it around, it really helps aerate the soil. Their burrowing improves soil aeration and water infiltration, and healthy worm populations help increase the amount of carbon stored in soils vis-a-vis their poo, right? And so this is like a really awesome organism. And a little fun fact, an earthworm can eat its own weight in organic matter every day. Imagine that. I weigh about 211 pounds. Imagine if I was walking around saying that I could eat 211 pounds of organic matter every day. I would be like in the Guinness Book of World Records. Yet worms are doing this on a regular basis. And so they are little superheroes that help keep our planet very, very healthy. All right. So what about possums? What is their role within the carbon cycle? And I know everybody thinks they look like rats. I actually almost put rats here instead of possums, but I just think that they're so cute. So what do possums do in order to help us out? Anybody in group opossum? Okay, cool. Yeah, so like Gloria said, that, like a decomposer situation. Yep, good job, Elizabeth. All right, boom. Let's go to possums. Let's go have fun. They can clean yards. That's right. That's good. So possums are omnivores that eat fruits, insects, and carrion and plant material. And so they're definitely decomposing stuff. They're keeping yards clean. They're eating insects. By consuming and breaking down organic matter, they help recycle carbon and nutrients. So again, think of something that's rotting. The vultures will come to it and eat what they can or whatever. These guys finish the job for us oftentimes, right? They also disperse seeds through their droppings, helping new plants grow and capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, right? I like to think about, I'm just going to be honest with you guys, I'm a huge nerd, sci-fi fantasy third nerd, and when I think about Tolkien and the Ents moving, basically this is how trees move. Right? They eat plants, they eat the seeds, and then as they move around, they can, poo the seeds, and then plants grow in other spaces. So it's almost like, I guess, helping out the ant situation. And the fun fact, possums are North America's only marsupials, meaning they carry and nurse their babies in a pouch. So it's like North America's baby kangaroo, right? And if you've ever seen a mama possum with all of the baby possums, they are really, really cute. All right, next one, and I think this next one is my favorite, and I think that they might be the most misunderstood. Who is in Group Raccoon, and what do they do for us? Awesome. Anybody from Team Raccoon? Yes, the trash panda. That's so good. Eat trash and leftovers. Yep, very good. Enrich soils. Very good. I love that. The trash panda. That's amazing. All right, let's go. Raccoons are omnivores, scavengers, and eat fruits, nuts, insects, and small animals and carrion, just like the possum. They help move carbon through food webs and assist in decomposition and consuming dead organisms. And because they're so skilled at this and they're so darn smart, they can get to stuff that other animals, including possums, can't get to, right? I've even seen I've seen raccoons open doors and windows before, so they're pretty smart. Raccoons can also disperse seeds, helping forests and plants regenerate and store carbon, right? Making sure that they move it from place to place. And the fun fact, and this is so cool, a raccoon's front paws are extremely sensitive and become even more sensitive when wet, helping them identify food by touch. And this is one of the ways that they can get into little places and spaces that other critters can't get into because of their ability to use their hands and work their hands and feeling for food and feeling around for food. They don't even really need to be able to see it. They can get to insects and worms and things of that nature. Really, really cool animals here. All right. Last but not least, who's Team Honeybee? Oh, I did not know that, Jocelyn. The wash bear. That's so cool. All right, honeybees. What do they do for us? Yep, major pollinators. Very good. And they're pretty darn cute. Pollinators that sustain all life. True facts. And honey is a beautiful, beautiful thing. All right, let's talk about the amazing honeybee. Honeybees pollinate flowering plants, trees, and crops. Pollination helps plants reproduce and grow, right? That's how they reproduce essentially. Plants remove carbon dioxide through the atmosphere through photosynthesis and store it in their leaves, stems, roots, and surrounding soil. So no big deal. If you like to breathe in clean air, then bees are your organism. Honeybees indirectly support many of the ecosystems that act as carbon sinks, essentially keeping trees and plants and bosks and ecosystems alive so that that carbon stays where it's supposed to go and doesn't go into the atmosphere. And a fun fact about honeybees, every single honeybee visit a single honeybee visits about 50 to 100 flowers during one foraging trip, helping thousands of plants reproduce throughout its lifetime. Think about that. One bee will go around to 50, between 50 and 100 flowers. That's a pretty amazing little life that they have, and they work really hard at doing it. And not to mention that honey is delicious. So as we continue through the slide, that is the carbon cycle, right? And how the carbon cycle contributes to the greenhouse effect through photosynthesis, absorption through oceans, and all these other things, right? The greenhouse effect is also our atmosphere essentially protects our planet from being too cold, right? How the greenhouse effect works is when the sun comes down, it hits our planet, bounces back out, the atmosphere itself, right, traps some of that heat in, just like a blanket does. Right? So if you're in your living room and you're chilly, you got the AC down to 50 degrees, you throw in a blanket, you get a little bit warmer. Where does that heat come from? Right? That heat comes from your body. So you're trapping the body heat in, right? The atmosphere works very similar in the greenhouse effect. Now, the problem lies that as we go underground, and we grab sequestered carbon vis-a-vis fossil fuels. Think oil, coal, gas, right? What are fossil fuels made out of? Well, they're made out of fossils. They're made out of old dead stuff, right? That's sequestered carbon under the ground. When we go under the ground and we pick it up and we use it and burn it, it essentially thickens the atmosphere, right? So if you're in your living room, you have one blanket on, you're a little chilly, put a second blanket on, what happens? You get a little bit warmer, right? What happens if you put a third or fourth blanket on, fifth blanket on? Right? Then you're starting to overheat. As we burn more greenhouse gases, we're putting more and more blankets onto the atmosphere, trapping more and more heat in. Okay, and that's what we call extreme carbon disruptions. That's the problem. The problem here isn't the carbon cycle. The problem that we're experiencing through global climate change is extreme carbon disruptions, us taking sequestered carbon and burning it, putting it into the atmosphere. Under natural conditions, carbon moves through the atmosphere, oceans, soil, plants, and animals over varying timescales. But using fossil fuels really thickens the atmosphere, trapping more heat onto the planet. And how does a planet deal with that heat? Or how does a planet deal with that energy? Through weather. So as it gets hotter, as we have more energy on the planet, weather becomes more unpredictable. And so we're going to break you guys into some groups again. Okay. These groups are not as fun and not as friendly, right? The groups are coal, oil, fossil gas. Many of you guys know this is natural gas, but we call it fossil gas because it's basically methane and plastic. And as you get into your group, what I'd like you to think about is how is your fossil fuel primarily used and how does it contribute to carbon pollution? Okay, we're just going to take like 5 minutes and break into our groups. million go nuts.
Oh, I'm sorry. I cut
No,
you off
we're good. We're
sentence.
good. We're totally good. I love it so much.
Yeah, people were having a great time in the chat.
Hey,
Sorry if I cut anyone off mid-sentence.
everybody, welcome back. I hope you had as an amazing of a discussion as we had in the Cole group. I hope you guys had some good discussions. Can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yes, we see the
Yeah.
slides.
All right, cool. So for my Cole group, how does control how is coal primarily used? What is it used for? Burn for steam? Sure. Anybody else out there? Awesome. Thank you, Anne Marie. All right, so coal, energy source. That's a big one. Coal around the world is primarily used for energy, especially electricity. Yeah. The U.S. has drastically reduced the amount of electricity that we produce vis-a-vis coal, but around the world, even though it's being reduced, it's still very much used as a source of electricity. Coal and how it contributes to the extreme carbon disruption is coal is one of the most carbon intensive fossil fuels. So when it's burned for electricity or industrial processes, it releases large amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. Now we've kind of talked about CO2 and what that does, but as we reduce more or produce more CO2 into the atmosphere, it's essentially making the atmosphere thicker, thicker, and thicker, like putting more and more blankets onto the planet, trapping in more heat. That's the problem that's happening with it, right? Burning CO2 increases atmospheric carbon levels and contributes to global warming and climate change. Now, listen, in the United States, we've closed down a lot of the coal-fired power plants and coal mines. That's a beautiful thing, right? Many of my ancestors were from Appalachia, and that's a terrible, hard job, right? But it's dangerous and all these other things. But when you take those jobs, which is one of the reasons why we have so much resistance, and don't replace them with other alternatives for people to make money, it becomes part of the controversy. Now, here's a fact. We don't call these fun facts, right? But these are facts. Coal, like most fossil fuels, are made from fossilized plants, not dinosaurs, over the Carboniferous period from over 300 million years ago. So that's where most of the coal that we have today actually comes from. And if you've seen some of the coal mining practices, not only are we digging mines today, but we're blowing off the tops of mountains. It's a pretty crazy situation. All right. What about oil? Who is in the oil group and who can tell me what oil is used for and how it contributes to, extreme carbon disruptions or global climate change? Definitely used for cars. Just because I love the movie, I like to say planes, trains, and automobiles when I'm talking about this, but all forms of transportation for sure. All right, let's check it out. Oil is naturally occurring liquid fossil fuel found deep underground in rock formations, made primarily from hydrocarbons. Kind of cool. Oil or petroleum is refined into fuels such as gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. When burned, these fuels release CO2 into the atmosphere. So the same thing that we were talking about for coal, as we burn oil for energy and we release those hydrocarbons, that CO2 goes into the atmosphere, thickening the atmosphere, creating a hotter planet for everybody. Transfer systems worldwide depend heavily on oil, which we've been able to see in the past couple of months, haven't we? Making it a major source of greenhouse gas emissions and significant driver of global warming, climate change, and I think we could add here political strife, right? In fact, according to Bill McKibben's latest book, up to one-third of the oil used each year is to move oil from one place to another. And we can see how bottlenecks happen with that if you look at just what's been happening in the Strait of Hormuz. So this is an interesting substance. All right. What about fossil gas? And I know many of y'all know this as natural gas. Here at the Cleo Institute, we don't call it natural gas because there's nothing natural about taking all of that methane out. But what is fossil gas used for? That's right, Grant. Very good. We like to call it methane gas as well. Very, very good. Yeah, I saw that too, Susan. It's pretty disheartening. So what is fossil gas used for, folks? And how does it contribute to extreme carbon disruptions? That's right. So let's go ahead and get in here. Fossil gas is primarily methane. So methane's an interesting thing because it's much more powerful of a greenhouse gas than CO2 is, something like 80 times more powerful. So before being burned, fossil gas moves through stages including extraction, processing, and transportation, all giving it opportunities to leak out directly into the atmosphere. During those stages, methane can be released directly into the atmosphere, can have pipe leaks, and so on and so forth. The sneaky part about natural gas, you can see this fact here, natural gas again, is that it's often called the cleanest fuel because you don't see the same smoke or you don't see the same grime as you do if you're burning coal or petroleum, right? But it's mostly made of methane, and methane is 80 times more powerful of a greenhouse gas than CO2 is. And so for each particle of methane that we can keep out of the atmosphere, it's like keeping 84 particles of CO2 out of the atmosphere. This is our chance, folks. This is a big chance by reducing the use of methane into the atmosphere or the release of methane into the atmosphere. This is a really big opportunity for us to keep some of those blankets from off the atmosphere. All right, next one, because I see we have a little bit of a time crunch, so I'm going to try and cruise over here. So for you folks that were in plastic, I'm sorry. I'm just going to kind of cruise through, but plastics are used for pretty much everything, unfortunately, and especially when we start thinking about single-use plastics, right? One-use plastic and single-use plastic are very different. If you make a chair from plastic that you can use for a very, very long time, or a hospital bed, that's different from making a water bottle or a plastic bag that you're going to use for 2 minutes. Most plastics are made from petroleum or natural gas. So these are those same fossil fuels we were talking about, right? Carbon used to create plastics comes from fossil fuels. Throughout their life cycle, from production to transportation to disposal, incineration, degradation, plastics release greenhouse gases as they break down. So even just sitting there in the dump or sitting there in the ocean as they're breaking apart, they're releasing those greenhouse gases straight into the atmosphere. And even when they're not burned, their manufacture requires fossil fuel extraction and energy use, adding carbon emissions to the atmosphere. And as this stuff breaks down, folks, we're finding microplastics in everything. Microplastics have been found everywhere in homes, natural places, oceans, inside the human body, inside the human brain. And these are folks that aren't necessarily even by the ocean. We're just finding it everywhere. And before we're like, oh, these are just natural parts to what normally happens within the planet's atmosphere, I'd like to bring up the almighty hockey stick graph, right? Because um, we've been able to measure carbon parts per million in the atmosphere for a very long time. How do we do this? Because science rocks. So we're able to extract ice cores, and within the ice cores, there's these little bubbles, right? And those bubbles, we can measure the carbon parts per million in that bubble, and then we can timestamp that bubble using radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating, essentially all carbon deteriorates at a constant rate, so you can see how much of that carbon has deteriorated and give that bubble essentially a timestamp. And as you could see from this graph, you could see the red line represents 300 parts per million into the atmosphere, and the graph goes up and down, representing natural fluctuations within the carbon cycle and the atmosphere. Right over here, you could see where we start to extract coal and oil and gas and use fossil fuels for energy. And right here is where we are today at 431 parts per million. Unfortunately, we don't know to what extent this is going to affect the planet. We can talk about what it's already doing, what we think that it's going to do, but it's not good. And so, as solutions, and as we start thinking about ways to address some of these other issues, we have to start thinking very fast about how to organize around things like clean energy transition, energy efficiency, protecting forests and planting trees, things like composting on a national or citywide scale, right? Respecting agricultural practices that keeps carbon in the ground without using fossil fuel fertilizers, electrification of everything, and using science when basing policy around these issues. For anybody that is interested, here are the sources that we use throughout this presentation. And now we can open it up for a Q&A. If anybody's interested in having more information about this topic, seeing how you can get involved in being part of the solution, you can scan the QR code, sign up for the newsletter, reach out to us at cleoinstitute.org. And thank you very much for everybody that came out today. I really appreciate you taking the time out of a busy day to come and talk with us about something as awesome as carbon.
Thank you so much, Owen. That was phenomenal. I I wonder if you can keep up that last slide with the QR code to give folks a moment to just scan that. Um, I'm pulling up the Q&A here and I don't see any questions. So if anyone has any questions about something that they heard today, please feel free to simply drop it in the chat or use the Q&A feature. And I'm just reading here to see if there are any questions that have been previously put in the chat. Okay.
Here you go. My bad. I was having difficulty sharing it again.
I don't see any questions.
Well, thank you so much,
That
everyone.
means you
It's
did a
really,
thorough job.
I hope so. I have a
You
tendency to
explained it
talk too
so well, you
fast.
left everyone questionless. I love it. Well, everyone, thank you so much again for joining today's webinar. We have another webinar coming up in fall of this year. And so if you, um, whatever channels you receive this communication, just continue to follow us on our socials. If you're not signed up for our newsletter, again, this QR code will help direct you to the Cleo Institute website where you are able to sign up for our newsletters and receive information about not only this webinar, but other phenomenal trainings that we offer. And if you are an educator, an organizational leader, and you would like for us to come and visit your institute, visit your organization to provide trainings and workshops for your staff. We are open for those engagements and we will typically come to you. And so we look forward to just hearing from you and hearing your feedback. Upon closing this webinar, you will receive a 3-question survey. We kept it really short just to get some feedback from you. We always want to improve our offerings, and so we would appreciate you just taking a couple minutes to jot down some of your feedback. Um, so I do see the chat is moving along, and so there are some questions here now. A lot of thanks to Owen. Great question from Alika Esperson. How important is voting in solutions to carbon reduction and why?
Well, I would say that that's very important. What would you say, Ireola?
Absolutely, policy is key. It's key to sustaining our decisions that we make as a collective community.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. Can we have a link to the webinar? Are we going to be posting this webinar anywhere? Ireola, do we
This
know over
webinar will
that?
be posted on the ResilientSea YouTube, so we will make that YouTube link available once it's uploaded.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
First step addressing. I'd have to say I agree with Grant. Yeah, acknowledge that it exists, and then organizing. And so, folks, last night we were part of a Miami-Dade County civic engagement webinar, and the whole idea was organizing with your community, right? If we don't let our thoughts and our voices be heard, how's anybody gonna know that we actually care about this? So organize with your community, let folks know that you care about this, that you know it's important, and together we can make a big difference.
Yes, we do have some questions now. I heard that it's Plastic Free July. Are there any resources you can recommend?
Oh, on our
That's pretty
website,
cool.
we do have those pamphlets that we created about plastic and how to work with it. So I would go to the cleoinstitute.org, and I believe it's how we get involved. And let me see. I'll post a link, or if anybody out there has the link to that, we could post the link, and and you can actually
Yep, there it
download.
is.
Oh, thank you, Jocelyn. You could
Thank you,
download
Jocelyn.
an actual pamphlet about plastics and how to become much more plastic free.
That's perfect. All right, our next question is, do you believe local government is responding effectively?
So, I don't want to get political here, and I will say that in Miami, both the mayor of Miami and the mayor of Miami-Dade County definitely at least care about this issue and partner with us. And I'm going to keep it at that. And can we always do things better? Yes. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to let your voices be heard. Let them know, let your local politicians know, let your state politicians, representatives know that this is something you care about. The more we let them know, the more that they understand that it's a priority for us. And just to give this to perspective and keep it out of the local and more at the large scale, the last presidential election, there was only one debate and neither candidate brought up the idea of global climate change during that debate. And that should be something that's on everybody's mind, every single politician, one of the top things. And so the more we voice our opinions and what we think and how we feel, the more important that it is.
Absolutely. The only thing I'd add to that, I remember we did a civic engagement workshop with Senator Dwight Bullard, and he said, a lot of times as citizens, we assume that our politicians are aware. We assume that it's on their on their agenda. We assume that it's on the forefront of their minds, but really it's the constituents, it's us that sort of help set those agendas, help set those priorities. And so don't assume that they know, don't assume that they have the information, assume not, and then make it your business to make it their business.
That's right. Speak truth to power.
Thank you, everyone. I don't see any additional questions. I think those were great questions to close out our program. I'm wishing you all a phenomenal rest of your week. And again, all the resources are there, and we'll send a recap email to those who were a part of today's webinar with all the resources mentioned today. Thank you, and have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.